Hello and welcome to another episode of Starside Chat. I'm one of your hosts, Zach Owens, and joining me as always is Aaron Capo.
Hello!
Well, I hope that you are prepared for a very fall-like February in terms of game releases, not in terms of weather. It has been snowing like crazy here in the Midwest last couple
groundhog
days,
did see its shadow, you know.
He was not wrong. I'll give him that. He was accurate in that assessment. Speaking of which, as a little side note, I picked up the 4K Blu-ray copy of Groundhog Day.
Whoa.
Because they have this is like a new thing that they're doing with movies to try to get people to come back and start buying like physical movies again. Is they're doing like all these steelbook cases. They're like, this is a re-release. It's now in 4K, but get the steelbook case, and it's like a thing for collectors, you know?
Yeah.
And it has worked on me. I don't know why, but I like a steelbook. I feel like
I agree with you.
When it comes to like game collectors, people like they kind of want the steelbook, but they also want the normal one because like if you see any of those like game collection channels on YouTube, they're always like, I don't like the way it breaks up the what's the word there?
The uniformity.
Yeah, uniformity of like the red Switch case.
Yeah.
And then just to have like a metal, steelbook one that's not quite the same dimensions, but no, so they are doing those. I actually saw Wario64 was tweeting about how Disney is releasing a Star Wars original trilogy steelbook thing. But like the picture of it was so bad. It was like the steelbook was like just a silver case and it said Disney in like big bold letters at the top. And then it was like a small little picture in the middle of like the Star Wars like movie poster or something like that, or like one of the characters from the movie. And it was like Disney 100 or whatever. And like all the comments were like, this is the worst steelbook I've ever seen. Like, what is this? It was terrible. So yeah, I feel like they're not going to sell very many of those. But that's like the new thing that they do to try to get people to buy physical movies is they're doing steelbooks now. And I picked up the Groundhog Day one. I saw that like basically all those Leica movies, those like the Paranorman and Coraline and those movies. I feel like all of those have gotten one. And then the other one I saw was Army of Darkness.
Ooh,
you remember that movie?
Yeah, I love that movie.
Yeah, so I picked that one up as well because they had that at Best Buy when I was there the other day, or
cool.
A couple weeks ago. So that was a cool one to get, but yeah, so that's a thing that's happening.
Interesting. I had no idea.
Yeah, I do like a steelbook though. I often find when it comes to games as well, if they're like gonna sell a like deluxe edition in quotes where it's maybe $10-$20 more, but it comes with like a steel book and a little like art book with it, I'm like, oh yeah I need that, even though I definitely do not need that.
Speaking of collector's editions, this isn't on our show notes, but I believe I saw something about how one of the developers of Starfield was asked on Twitter like, hey, like when are we going to get some sort of announcement or any kind of word from you guys? And he basically was like, we're working on the next like Vidoc / presentation, but we want to make sure it's right before we release it. So in the next couple weeks, we could get a somewhat of a final Vidoc for Starfield with an announcement of the date and a collector's edition reveal.
Ooh, I am very excited about that.
I can't find any record of this, so it's possible that was a Photoshop on TikTok, so who knows?
I mean, I hope that one also comes with a steelbook.
Yeah, I bet it will.
Well, and like the Fire Emblem Engage one that I got, like the collector's edition came with like the standard case and the steelbook. So I feel like, and I think that's what the Tears of the Kingdom one is going to have as well. So I feel like they're catching on. They know people like the normal one, so that there's like uniformity in their
bookshelf.
On their shelf, but they at least also have the cool looking steelbook one. But
well, should we get into some news this week?
Yeah, let's get into some news. We do have a lot of games to talk about this week, but also we're doing a special feature this episode where we're going to talk about our top 5 games in need of a sequel or like a series comeback, you know?
I'm very interested to see if our lists at all line up. I don't think that they will, actually.
Yeah, I know. So we came up with this like completely separately, so I have no idea what your list is going to be. So we'll find out. But first off, let's do some news. So Sony is making a pair of PS5 Bluetooth earbuds, and we talked very briefly about this before we started recording, but the reason I actually threw this into our show notes was specifically because of the fact that it frustrates me quite a bit that the PlayStation and Xbox do not just allow you to pair like a standard Bluetooth set of earbuds
it is crazy.
to your console. It's insane to me that that's just not a standard feature on modern consoles. So you can do it on the Switch, and the Switch is like not as powerful and like geared towards like core gamers as like the PS5 and the Xbox Series X, but somehow or another they've beaten them to the punch on this pretty standard like feature for modern technology. But
conversely though, I don't have any, like I guess my phone Bluetooth headphones, but I was like, oh, I just want to like plug an analog little headphone jack into the Switch controller, and I realized you could not do that this week. You have to plug it into the Switch.
Yeah, so that's the one thing is they do allow you to connect a like wired headset to your controller on the PS5 and the Xbox.
I didn't even notice that
don't have that.
The Pro controller doesn't have one on the Switch.
Yeah, I think that's why they had to enable Bluetooth earbud pairing, because they don't have that feature. Like, it's fine if you're just playing it, you know, portable mode.
Yeah. Because
you can just plug your headset into the Switch itself.
Yeah.
But when you're in docked mode, you really don't have an option outside of Bluetooth earbuds. So unless maybe you plug it in through like an old USB connection and you have a really long cord, but that would suck.
Yeah, especially if you're playing on a TV.
Yeah. So that's not an ideal situation. But And this is where the Xbox controller bothers me, because like I've had issues. I have like 3 Xbox Series X controllers, and I mean all of them. You connect a headset and it takes a while for the audio to switch over. And once it does happen, like very often it's very, you know, not a secure connection where like if it rotates or you accidentally bump it at all, the cord, like it just goes out in one of the ears for some reason, and you only have it in the left ear. I'm like, this is not a problem when I connect it to my computer or when I connect it to my DualSense controller. So it's not the headset or the cord. This is clearly just a problem with the controller. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what it is. I don't know how to fix that. I guess the fix would be Bluetooth earbud pairing. But really. I guess we're not gonna get there anytime soon, it seems like.
You know, we are gonna get to. We're at the end of a journey, Zach. The journey to release Dead Island 2. Yeah.
So this game was supposed to come out a long time ago. I don't remember when it was actually originally supposed to release.
Yeah, I don't either. It was the famous E3 trailer of the guy jogging was so long ago. Who knows how many E3s ago? But it became kind of a joke because we didn't hear about it for a long time. I think development probably stopped and started a number of times, but they revealed it again this past year, and they were like, guess what? It's coming out soon, and it's actually coming out earlier than expected.
Originally revealed all the way back in E3 2014.
Wow.
So yeah,
10 years ago.
Long time coming for this game. And now just randomly, they're like, it's going to come out a week early, a week before it was expected to come out. So they moved it up from April 28th to April 21st. I'm not super interested in this game because I have a lot of concern that it is going to feel like a game from 2014.
I think so too. I think with anything like this where development is so staggered and stop-start, there's almost no way that it's going to be a good game. They're probably just trying to push it out to save or to like earn any amount of money on their like sunken cost.
Yeah, it surprises me that games could, you know, be in such like development hell for that long and not get canceled.
Yeah.
But I guess like you spend enough time working on it, you just get to a point where it's gotta release at some point because you've sunk so much cost into it. But I don't know. I don't know how well that's gonna do or how well it's gonna turn out once it does release. But
I'm excited to watch reviews of it because I'm sure there will be a lot of people. I'm not going to play it, but I'm sure
just out of curiosity.
Yeah, morbid curiosity. I'm interested to see like what became of it because I did play all the way through the first Dead Island with my friends because you could play it in co-op, and it was cool. It was fun. It was it had some weird, novel ideas, and it was interesting. But it was definitely, I think, best played in co-op. And this one, I don't know. I don't know if people really aren't really into zombies anymore. I feel like there was that one motorcycle game that kind of crashed and burned because I think it was I was watching like a Game Informer interview with the because it was like their cover story, and the person interviewing the lead developer was like, "What do you say to those people that say like they're tired of zombie games?" And the lead developer was like, "I hope they're not, because I think we're doing a lot of cool stuff." But in fact, they weren't. And man, I watched a review of that game.
Also, you're not supposed to call them zombies. They were freakers in that game.
Terrible. Awful.
Yeah, a terrible name.
I watched a review of it recently for some reason, and it was like a big part of that game was like you kept running out of gasoline for your motorcycle and having to like track it down, and it was like a real hassle. And I don't know why. I mean, I guess like resource management is somewhat interesting, but I feel like that was a bad call by them. To have your thing
I feel
run
like
out of gas.
There were a series of bad calls with that game, probably.
But what about some good calls?
This is, I don't know if you'd call this a good call, but it was an interesting thing that came out this last week. Microsoft confirmed that Game Pass cannibalizes sales.
Which is obvious. We all knew that.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that was an obvious point. It was more or less Xbox just like confirming, oh yeah, that happens, we know. And it was a thing where Sony specifically said that they didn't want to release like their latest AAA releases on their subscription service because of this very thing. And I remember being a little bit of a question at the time. Well, if Sony is saying that they can't, offset the cost of production by just like throwing it onto a subscription service as opposed to allowing time for people to actually buy the game. Like, what's going on with Microsoft? Like, is Game Pass actually like gonna struggle because of that? And I mean, it's pretty obvious to me that people who like to buy physical games or like to sort of have like a collection of physical games, all of their physical copies are on the Switch and the PlayStation. Yeah. Like, nobody buys physical copies of Xbox games.
Yeah. The Series S, I think, sells way better than the X.
Yeah, and such that this next story kind of ties into that, where Redfall is going to get a physical release, but it will only include a download code instead of a disc. Such that, like, why would you buy the physical release of this game?
I don't know. And this was also, it also is going to require an online connection to play, even in single player, which people are not happy about.
Yeah, nobody likes that. That is a very bad call.
Weird.
Even in single player mode, if you are playing Redfall offline, or not offline, I guess, but like in single player mode, you still need an online connection.
Yeah.
And I feel like these kinds of games hurt like games preservation.
That's very true, yeah, because we're seeing it right now with streaming services. Like HBO is just like removing stuff for tax benefits, and there's just not a way to watch some things now. Like, unless you bought a DVD of it from like Barnes & Noble or Best Buy or something, you basically can't watch. There was a period of time, I think they've moved Westworld over to another service, like they're leasing it out to like Tubi or something. But there was a period of time where you just like could not watch Westworld legitimately because they removed it.
They didn't produce physical copies of it?
No, you could only watch it with physical copies. Yeah, you'd have to go to Best Buy and get physical copies. But you couldn't stream it, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, so I don't know. I don't like this. I think it's bad. I remember, I think it was BioShock released like a physical copy for the Switch, but it was just a download code, and everybody was like, no, this is like, I'm not buying this. And so now, like, obviously Redfall's coming to Game Pass, So most of the people who play it are just going to download it through Game Pass anyway. But I mean, what's the point of producing a physical version of it if you're just going to have a download code in it? I think you need companies to like come up with a smarter way of releasing stuff. Like you should, like EA, for instance, should never produce a physical copy of Madden.
Yeah.
They should, it just never. Your sports games, those don't hold value. Like who wants a copy of Madden 2012?
You know what they should do?
Those are just taking up space in a dump somewhere or in the back room of like GameStop.
I agree.
And nobody wants them.
Madden should be a subscription, I think.
Yeah, I mean, for years, people have been saying that Madden should not produce a new copy or a new version of Madden every year.
It's a crazy amount of waste.
It should just be like a subscription service that like is basically like Overwatch. It's just like they have one game and they just keep updating it every year and you subscribe to keep playing. And that way they don't have to release a new thing every time. But I guess they want that, big, like, payday every time they release a new copy. But like those physical versions don't hold any value. So there's no point to producing them. Whereas with something like, and I think even to an extent, Call of Duty is the same way, where I guess they do have like a single player thing that maybe people might be interested, but like it's mostly a multiplayer situation. So if it's like an annualized release, like a sports game or like an online only multiplayer thing, I feel like just go ahead and don't release a physical version. But on games that are, solo player or something you can play offline, that's going to hold value, that's going to, you're going to want to have a physical copy on your shelf, go ahead and make those and make a bunch of them. Make more of them now that you're saving the money by not producing a physical version of Madden, So I don't know. I feel like it's dumb to me that they've not figured this out yet, but that's kind of a side note to the fact that Redfall is not going to get an actual disc, which kind of sucks.
It is weird, and it definitely is a money thing, which is a bummer whenever money dictates stuff. But hopefully, if it's beloved, maybe they will be like, hey, guess what? Here is a disc of it. Maybe like what is the thing that Hollow Knight comes out on?
Fangamer?
Yeah, maybe Fangamer will pick it up, or some other boutique site will be like, well, like guess
Strictly Limited or something like that.
Yeah, that would be great. But it doesn't make any sense.
That normally happens with like indie games. Like this is Bethesda.
It's true. That's a good point.
Owned by Microsoft.
Yeah.
It's just
a big player. I don't understand why they're doing this.
I think it's IM 8-bits that's producing a physical version of Psychonauts 2.
Really?
So like that's owned by Microsoft, and I feel like maybe it's possible. Maybe
I don't know.
But
it's weird. Let's talk about Hyper Light Breakers, Zach.
Yeah, I did not see this news that you have in here.
I am a big fan of Hyper Light Drifter. I love that game. I've beaten it on PC and PS4, and I started it on Switch, but I never beat it on Switch. I love Hyper Light Drifter. I did not super like the follow-up, whose name I can't remember.
Yeah, Solar Ash.
It wasn't exactly what I wanted from a 3D version of that game.
Yeah, we both tried it and just couldn't get into it.
Hyper Light Breakers is a more direct sequel to Hyper Light Drifter, but also in 3D. And they have revealed this week to the website Rock Paper Shotgun that they're shifting over to a procedural open world roguelike. Originally, it was going to be more narrative, I think, but what do you think about this? I don't know how to feel about it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't love roguelikes, which is my big sort of hesitation with that. But I do find it interesting, the idea of an open world roguelike. I don't know why.
I don't know what that means.
Well, so I think we talked about it a couple of weeks ago. There's another like open world roguelike game that's coming out that I forget the name of, that we talked about very briefly, and we were just like trying to figure out what like an open world roguelike game would sort of play like.
I would assume it's going to be like, here's what I want to know. How procedural is it? Is every run going to be a new world, or do you generate the world like that's it? and then all of your runs take place in the same world until you like remix the world. I don't know. The thing I liked the most about Hyper Light Drifter was your guy. Like, you were the guy, and you were slowly improving your powers and getting new abilities. It's very much a Metroids type thing, where you're slowly getting bigger, you're exploring new areas. The art was really cool. The sound was really cool, like sound design. And I don't know that an open world third-person roguelike is going to capture the same mood as the original. The mood of the first one was very like somber and contemplative and cool. And this one, I don't know. I really want to see this in action. I'm not sure when that's going to happen.
Yeah, so the game I was thinking of is called Ravenbound. And that one, I don't even think the world is necessarily procedurally generated. I think that's still the same, maybe. So there is like some degree of like, kind of what you're looking for.
Yeah.
Which I think will help. But yeah, I am trying to think of a version of like an open world version of Hyper Light Drifter where it's procedurally generated, and that makes it better than Hyper Light Drifter.
I don't know. I like how everything is designed in Hyper Light Drifter. It's all bespoke. Everything is put there by a person. It leads to some interesting set pieces. So, yeah, I don't know. I guess we'll see. The other thing I want to talk about is AI related. We haven't really talked about AI on this show recently, but it's popping off these days. Everything's AI these days. Reportedly, Minecraft has an internal project right now. No one has seen it. It's just rumored. But they have an AI model that will play Minecraft for you. You basically say like, AI, I'd like for you to build a house out of this type of wood, and it will play the game for you and find that type of wood and make a house for you. And I don't know if there's an application for this or not yet, but it is something I'd want to play with, I have to say. I don't know if I'd pay money for it, but if I could like instruct an AI to play Minecraft for me, I think I would interact with that. I think that would be cool.
I think if it were like while you're playing, you can have like an AI buddy.
Now
that you could just like say, hey, I want you to build me this over here. And they'll just like get to work on it while you're like doing other things. Like that sounds interesting to me. But like just like saying, hey, play Minecraft for me and I will watch. Like I'm not into that because you could just turn on a Twitch stream.
That is interesting. I had not thought about like playing with it. That probably is where they're wanting to get to, is a game that like you can play with. But I think this is an interesting first step.
Partner.
Yeah, I think that's very cool. And this is definitely a cool first step in that they're probably definitely working towards. But it's interesting. I wonder if we'll see this at any point. I wonder if they'll ever release this publicly. But it's just something I saw this week that I thought was cool.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about, but yeah. Have you had a chance to see any of the PSVR 2 reviews?
Yes, and I believe the general consensus is that it is cool and it does feel like an iteration on VR, but it is very expensive and the library just isn't there yet.
Yeah, I was going to say, from what I've heard, it's sort of lacking a killer app, whereas like something like Horizon Call of the Mountain, which is the thing that they wanted to be, that is just kind of not as good as people were hoping it would be. Because it does look nice to be in the world and to be able to witness those big robot monster things like from like scale height or whatever. That's like very interesting, but like 70% of the game is climbing, and that's not very fun to do in VR.
I also don't know that bow and arrow is fun to do in VR. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's not like how even regular Horizon. I think one of the reasons I haven't really engaged with Horizon Forbidden West, or the first one, Zero Dawn, is because I don't love just having a bow and arrow all the time. So I don't know.
To their credit, the bow mechanics are the best I've ever used in a game with those games, and I understand why you say that, because normally I'm not drawn to like bow and arrow gameplay, but they like knocked it out of the park with those two games, and so I would say it's easily the best it's ever been. in those games. And so I don't mind it when I'm playing Horizon. I think it's actually really good. And they have like a variety of weapons to use as well. So it's not necessarily strictly bow and arrow, but that's kind of the bread and butter.
We used to be very, very into VR when it was still niche. But now it's become more widestream, and I've started caring less about it, but I do still have my ear to the ground.
Yeah, I know it's something you're always following and you're into, but like to me, it's just a different version of like motion control gaming, you know? Like the Xbox Kinect. Like I don't want that.
I think the promise of it, the potential of it is there, and eventually we will get to a place where it is something that I will want to engage with, but we're not there yet because I don't think there is a killer app yet for it, and because what?
I think you need like the full like rig to make it compelling. Like you need the Ready Player One where you're like in a suit, you're sitting in like a thing, or you're hooked up into some kind of contraption that makes it so that you can feel like you're moving in this virtual world to really sell it. Whereas right now you're stationary and you just need enough space so that when you swing your arm, you don't hit a wall or something or break a lamp. And you can't move within the world, really. You have to like, oh, here's a spot I can jump to. And so it's just like very static, like maneuvers to get from point A to point B in a way that does not feel at all compelling to me.
I think we're getting there. I think the potential's still there, and they're still going to continue to iterate on it. And the word on the street is that the Quest 3 is going to be being announced this year. Quest 2 has been out for a couple, 3 or 4 years. And it's, I think, the easiest entry point for VR. It's the cheapest, as well as you don't need a computer, but you can hook it up to a computer if you want to. You are unfortunately in Meta's ecosystem, so you don't have access to like cool stuff on, there's workarounds, but there's not like native ways to play, stuff on Steam. But Quest 3 is supposedly going to be another iteration on that is consumer facing. The last couple headsets that Meta has put out have not super been consumer facing. They've been more business to business. So I'm interested to see what the Quest 3, what its capabilities are, as well as how they're going to iterate on games and whatnot. So it's interesting. I do still think, I've said this for a while, the killer app for VR is something that hasn't been invented yet. It's some sort of, I believe, some sort of procedural world that you can go to, similar to like a Sword Art Online or something. Yeah. But no one has really done that yet, I don't think. And a lot of it, I think for that reason, a lot of things that are in VR still feel like tech demos. But yeah, eventually someone will...
That's the best way of putting it. The games now, even like the big AAA ones, still feel like tech demos.
Yeah. So we'll see. I'm interested to see what the Quest 3 does to the ecosystem, if more people adopt it, and what other like surprises we'll have when they do Oculus Connect or whatever I don't call it Oculus Connect anymore, but whatever they do in the fall. But should we move on to games out this week?
Yeah, I don't know if you got a chance to play it or see any of it, but that sort of cute co-op game on the Switch called Blanc is out. I saw some people play a little bit of it. It's $15, and the note that I saw is that it's very short.
I believe that.
I like the art style of it.
It's a small team, right? I think it was like developed by like 1 or 2 people.
You might be right. I'm not sure. But yeah, I didn't end up picking this one up. But I watched some people play it, and some of the gameplay seemed maybe slightly frustrating. Like there was one part where they were having to like sort of ferry these ducks like across like windy areas, and like when the deer or the dog, which are the two main characters that you're playing as in co-op, when they sort of enter the area where the wind is blowing, there's like a little bubble that kind of forms around them, and so that's where the ducks are safe for you to sort of ferry them across that without them being blown away. And so you're supposed to like take them to their mother basically through this sort of windy path, and it seemed like it was not working very well for them. They found it incredibly frustrating, the people I was watching play it. So I was like, Yeah, I don't know. With it being very short and very co-op centric and some of the mechanics not seeming like they feel that great, I might not play this. But it seems to be getting somewhat mixed reviews. I think like maybe I've seen some like 6s out of 10 for it. So the other one that's out that I think is also getting pretty mixed reviews is Wanted Dead, which I think we've talked maybe briefly about. This is that sort of Ninja Gaiden-esque game from, I think, a lot of former Ninja Gaiden developers. And it's like they very openly call it a throwback to basically the PS2 generation of consoles and for like third-person action games. And this is one of those, it's supposed to be very difficult, but the people I've watched play this, it seems frustrating in a way. Like there's a fine line between difficult but like fair, which I think is something like Elden Ring, and difficult and not, just doesn't feel good at all. And that's potentially the area where this game might land. But I would say do some research if you're thinking about picking this up because you are a big fan of Ninja Gaiden before you actually dive in. But and then Tales of Symphonia Remastered. I don't plan on picking this up, but this is one of the more well-liked Tales of games from the GameCube generation. So I think it's cool that it's been re-released for modern hardware, but from what I've seen, it doesn't seem like they've done much with it. It's more or less a port rather than necessarily a remaster, but it's there if you want it. And the game that I'm actually excited about and have actually played a little bit this week is Wild Hearts, which is the Koei Tecmo Monster Hunter clone, basically. I guess they maybe don't want you to call it a clone, but so from the developers of like the Warriors games, you know, the ones that make those Muso style games where you're fighting like thousands of people at once or whatever. But they've gone a completely different direction and basically made their own Monster Hunter. And I have put a little bit of time into it, and it's cool. It's my main interest with this game was, are they finally going to make Monster Hunter accessible and like streamlined and something that is like not like a crazy hill to climb to get into it the way Monster Hunter is? And my initial impression would be, yes, they have done that. Now, the question is it deep enough mechanically and interesting enough to have the sort of long tail that Monster Hunter has? And that's sort of the thing that I guess we'll have to wait and see on. But for reference, 2 years ago when Monster Hunter Rise came out on the Switch, I was like, okay, I loved Monster Hunter World. Like, this is going to happen. It's going to be great. I'm going to get into this. And I picked it up and I started it, and I swear like the first 2 or 3 hours are just wandering around this hub area, like clicking through tutorials,
learning
like
how to do everything,
text windows and just nonsense, talking to characters, a bunch of text windows and stuff like that. And it was awful. I was like, I cannot do this. This is so stupid. Like, this is the worst way to start off in any game, is just make me read through like pages and pages, like basically a giant instruction manual. And then like when they finally do turn you loose and they're like, okay, you can, I went to like the training area to try to like pick a weapon and be like, okay, I need to remember how to do this. It's been a while. And it was tough trying to remember how the different like mechanics work with some of the different weapons. And I just like got into this circle of sort of decision-making disability on what I wanted to even like pick as my first weapon to go out on hunts with. And that was basically it. I just fell off of it. I was like, I cannot do this between the like text and, you know, windows on top of windows on top of windows and like menus and all of this stuff, and trying to remember how the like mechanics of everything worked. I just like, I couldn't do it. And so I fell off and ended up regretting having even picked it up in the first place. And then like a few weeks ago, actually, the game got re-released on like the PlayStation and the Xbox, and it was out on Game Pass. And I was watching some people stream it on Twitch, and they were, of course, in the in-game by now. And they were playing it, and it seemed, I was like, oh yeah, this is this is why I like Monster Hunter World so much. I was like, maybe I should give it another chance. Maybe I fell off of it too early. And so I jumped back in, and I was like, oh yeah, this is why I ended up not playing it in the first place, was because it was, again, you have to go through that just like horrible onboarding process. Yeah. Of like trying to get through like the instructions and the tutorials and sort of figure out how to actually get out on the hunts and everything. And so again, I just like couldn't do it. And so I waited for Wild Hearts to come out. And sure enough, like they get you into the action fairly quickly in Wild Hearts. And they sort of slowly take their time, like building into the mechanics of things. And the first weapon they start you out with is like a katana. And like it is mechanically simple enough to grasp for like a starter weapon. And so like I very quickly understood how I was supposed to use it. And they very slowly start building into some of the other mechanics. Like at first you have like no HUD elements basically. And then as you're going through the tutorial, it sort of populates your HUD a little bit and you start getting some more of the things. It is just a significantly smarter way to like bring people into the experience without overwhelming them immediately.
Yeah. Walls of text.
Yeah, exactly. And so I feel like I am immediately more interested in this game than I ever was with Monster Hunter Rise. And yeah, I was having fun with it. Last night I played for a couple of hours, did like a couple of the hunts, and there's like 8 weapons to choose from at the start. And like, obviously it's not going to have quite the depth of a Monster Hunter game right now because they've had years and years to develop new monsters to fight. And so there's going to be fewer here. Same with the weapons. There's going to be fewer to start out with. But eventually you figure over time they're going to be adding more. And what they do have is interesting. And the interesting mechanic that they have that sort of differs from Monster Hunter is there's like a building mechanic. So it's not quite like Fortnite, so don't think of it that way, but like you can basically hit a button and like start building boxes in front of you, and you use that to like block a monster. If it's kind of charging at you, you can build a couple of boxes up and it'll run into it and get stunned a little bit, and you can quickly like run up the boxes and jump off of it and do like this crazy powerful like downward attack on them. And so it just adds like, you know, another element to the movement and the combat that I think is pretty interesting to start out with. And you can also throw down like a little spring thing, and so you can run across it and jump off of it. And so it just immediately, with those elements alone, you feel so much more mobile than you ever do in Monster Hunter as well, where like we talked about it when we talked about Elden Ring, where you feel a little bit in a Monster Hunter game like you're running through water and you're just moving so slow, and there's this giant monster that's like basically running circles around you while spinning, you know, around and around, and you just like are trying to avoid him as best as you can, and then you have to like charge up this like really slow attack to actually deal any damage. And that takes a long time to sort of a little bit get your sea legs with, and then once you kind of figure it out, you're like, okay, now I understand this, now I get the mechanics of it. And like that can be like the formula, the sort of loop of going out on the hunts, taking out these big, like basically big boss fights and taking them out, and then taking their parts and crafting new armor and new weapons and things like that, and then going out and fighting even more challenging versions. And you know you'll build up like this big closet basically full of different armor pieces that you can swap in and out that are ideally suited for dealing with different types of monsters. And so you're sort of building your character up that way. It's a very compelling loop that I get why is very, very addicting for people who love like the Monster Hunter formula. And so I'm excited to see more of Wild Hearts and see how else like what some of the other monsters are like. But I think just from a introductory standpoint, it's so much easier to get into this game than it ever was Monster Hunter Rise.
Now, is it like Monster Hunter in that you can like group up with people?
Yeah. So Monster Hunter was always, especially with Monster Hunter World, was always at its best when you were playing in co-op, even if you're just doing like kind of random matchmaking and joining up with randoms. It definitely, when it came to the end game, like those big monsters that you're fighting in the end game are definitely scaled around like co-op, so that you have at least one other person to kind of take the heat off of you for a moment. And you can definitely play in co-op, I feel like all the way through with Wild Hearts 2. Like once you go on a hunt, you can just hit a button. It'll be like people can join you. There's a way for you to search to kind of go help other people out if they are calling for help. During a hunt. You can join them. And I want to say, I don't know what the end game looks like, but I feel like it's probably going to be pretty similar to Monster Hunter, where you just like you go to sort of a bounty board and you're like, okay, here's the monsters that are available to hunt, and you can pick what you want based on what you're trying to craft. And then you go, okay, let's do this in co-op, and you'll do matchmaking or something like that. I'm supposing that's probably how it works, but I'm not there yet, obviously. But even like on the first hunt, like there was a tutorial that popped up and it was like, hit this button to like ask for help, and co-op people will join you. And I like did it before I even read the thing. I was like, oh, people are going to join me now. And so, yeah, I played through the first hunt with some co-op partners, and it made it easier. So, yeah, that's one of the very fun aspects of these games. So definitely they have that.
Cool. Should we put it on the Games of the Year builder?
Yeah, we should actually. So right now we have Fire Emblem Engage 1, Dead Space Remake 2, and Hi-Fi Rush 3. It is very early in my Wild Hearts time, so I'm just going to slot it in at number 3 after Dead Space Remake, which we might have to rearrange those as well, because I have actually finished both Fire Emblem Engage and Dead Space Remake.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, we can talk about more of those later. But do you want to, for now, jump into our top 5 games in need of a sequel?
Let's do it. So how do you want to do this? You want to go back and forth as we usually do?
Yeah, let's do it that way.
Why don't you give me your number 5 for a game that hasn't had a sequel in a while and needs a sequel?
My number 5 is Astro's Playroom.
Oh, that's interesting.
So I know Team Asobi is working on something. We assumed it would be like a launch game for PSVR 2, and maybe it still is a PSVR 2 game, but it didn't come out at launch. But I'm hoping they'd make a full-on like 3D platformer, and that Astro becomes Sony's Mario. And I would love it if that team made like a full game that was not, a tech demo for the PS5 controller or a PSVR game. I want like them to do a full thing. And so I'm excited to see what they announce next, but I certainly hope that it is like a full-fledged sequel to what they did with Astro's Playroom.
I've only heard good things about Astro's Playroom.
It's very good. Like everybody says, well, it's just a tech demo for the controller. And while that's true, and it's definitely like meant to be like a celebration of all things PlayStation, because you're like collecting artifacts that are just like different pieces of PlayStation hardware from, over the years. And so there's definitely that aspect of it. But it does feel more of a, 3D platformer than you would think, given that it is kind of a tech demo for just to show off what the PlayStation controller can do. So if they were able to flesh that out and build it into like a full-fledged sequel, that would be awesome. And I'm hoping that maybe over the summer, when Summer Games Fest happens, whatever PlayStation show they have, they show what Team Asobi's working on, and hopefully it is a sequel to this game. What's your number 5?
My number 5 is a game that I loved as a child. It did already get kind of a remake kind of thing, but it's Deus Ex.
Oh, yeah.
Deus Ex was a wonderful game when I played it originally on PC, the first one. And then they had Invisible War, which was okay. I played through, I beat it, and it had interesting ideas, but I don't think reached the highs that the first one reached to. Then there was a lot of time where nothing was going on, and then they revealed Human Revolutions. Or Revolution? I don't remember if it's plural or not. But I loved that game. I thought it was great. They did a lot of interesting things. It didn't... similar to Invisible War, unfortunately, I don't think it reached the highs as the original one did. But it was still cool. It had a very cool art style. They released a sequel to that called Mankind Divided that I did not play because it was poorly reviewed, and it also was apparently very short. They also made a very dumb, like, mobile game that was first person where you, like, tapped through stuff. I don't know. The company that made that was doing some weird stuff for a while, but I would love a full reboot of the franchise. And I think it would be great if it was still in that, like, build engine style, like, retro. Retro shooters are very much a thing right now, but I don't think anyone has done a very cool, like, retro RPG in the style of Deus Ex. And if it was actually the Deus Ex property with, like, modern technology but still in that build engine, I think that would be very cool. Even if it was a modern day, I mean, Cyberpunk 2077 is a little bit what I was looking for with this, where you're a guy who is able to augment yourself and you're like in an open world and whatnot. But scale that back a little bit. I liked the concept of Deus Ex taking place in hub worlds. Hub worlds, I think, are not really a thing I think you see in modern games because everything wants to be a completely open world and seamless. But
you do get some. And sorry to interrupt, but this was a thing I was thinking about with that Dragon Age thing we talked about last week. That leak.
Yeah.
This is a complete side note, but I listened to some podcasts where people were like, so the article that released with that leak were people talking about how at one point Dragon Age Dreadwolf was supposed to be like a Destiny style game where it was like going to be a game of service as whatever. And then after Anthem failed or flopped, they like tried to redirect to make it more of just a normal single player game. And they were like, but you can definitely feel the remnants of that style of game in here because there's like a hub world and then you talk to people and go out on missions. And I'm like, did you ever play Mass Effect or any of the other Dragon Ages? Because this is just like a pretty common like structure for a game that's not open world, and that's really all it is.
Mass Effect is a great template, I think, because it is a thing where you can go to a town, or I mean, in this instance it would be a planet, but there's a bunch of things to do on that planet / town, and there's like quest objectives and interesting little pockets that you can find. But the story doesn't progress until you leave that town to the next town. And that's when you get like a big story beat or something.
And you can definitely build up your understanding of the characters and your relationship to them by like spending time in the hub area with those people and talking to them. That's kind of how you manage inventory and things like that.
I guess my thesis is that I would love a retro futuristic Deus Ex game. Somewhat, it doesn't have to be in the build engine, but I think that would be best. And it could even be called Deus Ex 2. And it could be a direct sequel to Deus Ex and just forget about Invisible War and all that other stuff. And I think that would be very good. That's my number 5. What's your number 4?
My number 4 is Castle Crashers.
Oh.
Did you ever play?
No, I never did.
Oh, maybe my favorite Xbox Live Arcade game back on the 360 era. It's basically sort of a side-scrolling beat-em-up style game, but not really. A little bit of... I'm trying to remember if it's a little bit of an RPG or not, but there are like different characters you can pick to play as, and it was so much fun. It had kind of a goofy, lighthearted sense of humor to it, and you could play with up to 4 people, and there were like some crazy boss fights to it, but it was definitely one of my favorite games from the 360 era, just because of definitely from the Xbox Live Arcade days, if you remember those days.
Oh yeah.
It was maybe the first game to really get me into like the beat 'em up genre, because I don't really like beat 'em ups that much, But this one, since you're like, I think you have maybe some like magic abilities as well, and you have like your sword and your different stuff like that. So it doesn't feel like a standard beat 'em up to me. And I had so much fun playing that game. I must have played it through like multiple times as well. And I basically, ever since that game came out and I played through it, I have been like waiting for a sequel to that game, and they've just not done it. And so I would love it if one of these days they bring back Castle Crashers but do a sequel to it. I think that would be awesome. What's your number 4?
We did a blind spotting on this game, and I think it is ripe for a sequel. I'm talking about, of course, Uplink, the hacker simulator. There currently are a number of hacking games like Hacknet and things like that, but those I think are a little too real. I liked that Uplink was very much it was hacking in a way that where you didn't really know what hacking was, like very early, like almost 90s hacking, where like you would just like press a button for a password breaker or whatever. And I think you could do a lot of interesting, cool stuff with an Uplink sequel, especially if you like took it out. I'm thinking specifically about that Quadrilateral Cowboy game that I really like, where you took your laptop with you, and every once in a while anywhere really, you could throw it out onto a table, and then you were in your terminal typing stuff and hacking things in real time. And I think if they incorporated that element where you were in first person walking around, but also you could hack stuff in like a very retro way, I think that would be very cool. Kind of the promise of Watch Dogs, but not everything is on a phone. You would still have a laptop, and it would be more retro than that. But that's my number 4. What is your number 3?
My number 3 is Super Mario RPG.
Ooh.
And this one, I mean, obviously it's a classic, and there have been games similar to this that have come out since, but none of them star Mario. And one of the things that I like a lot about the Mario and Rabbids games is that it basically feels like the closest thing that we're probably ever likely to get to Super Mario RPG. It would be great if it didn't star the Rabbids and it were made by Square Enix, but you know, also like I never played the Paper Mario games. I know like the first couple of Paper Mario games were supposed to be like spiritual successors to this, and I think maybe there was on like the DS they had done some games vaguely similar to Super Mario RPG, but this game just has sort of a magic about it. I'm not sure how to explain it, but and actually we're going to talk eventually later on in this episode about Sea of Stars demo, because I played that, and one of the things that it has, and also Yakuza Like a Dragon had, which is also a turn-based game, is this concept from Super Mario RPG where it's turn-based battles, but you like select your attack, and when you go to attack, there's like a timing window where if you hit the action button as your attack is going, it like doubles the damage basically. And same with like on defense, when the other character goes to attack you, if you time a button press right, you sort of defend yourself a little and you take less damage. And it was a very smart, clever way of making turn-based combat more engaging. And it was something that I very much liked with Yakuza Like a Dragon, and in this very brief Sea of Stars demo that I played. And maybe Sea of Stars is just like what I'm looking for, you know, what will end up being the game that will be sort of what I'm hoping to get with Super Mario RPG sequel. But I mean, it's a rights issue thing, I'm sure, that which is why Super Mario RPG 2 is likely to never happen. But I mean, you know, an old school SNES era RPG starring Mario and friends, like expand that out to basically the Smash roster and just imagine what they could do.
Now that would be insane.
Give it to Square Enix and let them make a huge like Super Smash RPG. That would be insane to think about, and I would love it. What's your number 3?
I got 2 N64 games on this list, and this is the first one. Conker's Bad Fur Day is a game that I loved when I was a kid. I think would be very difficult to make today, and I think there's a reason we've never seen a sequel to it. But man, It's not just like I found it to be very funny when I was a child, but obviously I don't know if the humor has like maintained. But
Yeah.
the number of things you could do in that game, like there were so many interesting segments. There was a segment that was a parody of The Matrix that was actually very fun, where you were in the like bank heist or whatever scene, and you were doing flips and shooting people, and there were like vehicle segments, and there were just like the diversity of actions that you did in that game, and like the diversity of environments are, I think, incredibly unique and fun. And I would love another version of that. I don't know if they could do like, I don't know what like the comedy would be like in this, because it is just like there is a part where you just like are in a world made of poop, and you're just like they're like singing a song to you about it, and it's just like I don't know if it would hit the same way or be as funny to me since I'm not as young, but I don't know.
Yeah, this is like the Ren and Stimpy era.
Exactly.
So there's like a certain level of humor that was like very in at the time, and I don't know that is.
It's just like gross out humor almost at points. But I think it would be fun. I like the idea of a very I don't know the word I'm looking for. Irreverent, I think, is maybe a good...
I was just going to say irreverent.
An irreverent style Banjo-Kazooie, but it's not even really a Banjo-Kazooie because you're not super collecting stuff, and the story is interesting. It's told in a very cool way. I don't know. I loved that game.
Would like an irreverent Ratchet and Clank maybe be the analog?
I almost think the reason it works is because it took something so like innocent. Like original Conker's games do exist, and he's just like a little squirrel having a good time. And this completely flipped it. So you would need to make it almost like Kirby's Bad Fur Day or something. Something where it's a super innocent guy who just like...
Oh, man.
It would be crazy. But...
like Happy Tree Friends level.
Similar. But I think that would be very fun. I don't know who... Like, it was a Rare game, and Rare obviously has been dismantled.
Yeah.
But, yeah, that's my...
Microsoft needs to reform Rare.
They could make so much money making just a straight up Banjo-Kazooie game, and I mean he's in Smash. I don't know. I don't know what's going on. I mean they're making that Perfect Dark supposedly, but we haven't heard about that in forever.
Yeah.
That's my number 3 though. What's your number 3?
I already did my 3, so we're doing my number 2.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And both my number 2 and my number 1 are games we've done blind spottings on.
What could it be?
Number 2 is Red Faction.
Yes.
I don't know what's going on, who owns the rights to this, but I feel like the studio that originally made those games is gone, and so I don't know what's going on with the rights to these, but they did re-release Red Faction Guerrilla, the Remastered edition.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Like years ago now. And we did blind spotting on it around that time. And what a cool thing. Like, you're just running around Mars. It's basically like a GTA-style game set on Mars, but it has, like, full destruction. Like, destructible environments. Yeah, I thought for sure, like, there was an era in the 360 generation between, like, Battlefield and Red Faction Guerrilla where it was like, oh, yeah, destructible environments are awesome. It completely changes the way, multiplayer things play out, because you're like, you can't just rely on hiding out in a building because eventually somebody's just going to destroy that building. And the battlefield's going to completely change. And it was the same way throughout the entire like single player story of Red Faction Guerrilla. And they had like these fun little side quest type of things you could do. They were more like activity than actual quests, but like it just like played into throwing mines around and seeing how fast you can destroy a building basically. And it's just like having fun stuff with that. And there was like one point where you get into a mech and you're just like running around, like tearing through stuff. And it was just like, the Rampage games way back in the day, if you remember those, is like a third person action game version of that, but set on Mars. And I think it shocked me a little bit that destructible environments didn't continue to be a thing like beyond that. And that even like the very next Red Faction game they made didn't end up continuing on in that style. But I would love it if it made a comeback, and they did. eventually start making Red Faction games again, and they really went back to the Red Faction Guerrilla formula and made, like, not that we necessarily need more open world games, but like I would love it if they did return to this. I think it would be fun. What's your number 2?
This is a game similar to Deus Ex. It's had a couple different iterations. But I love the Thief series.
Oh, yeah.
Thief 2 The Metal Age is one of my favorite games of all time. And I've played it multiple times. I've only beaten it like maybe twice or 3 times. But I love that game. They made another version of it that is just called Thief. Actually, I think they've done this. It might be called like Thieves Among Us or something. But they made another one that was okay. It did some things right. It did some things wrong. You couldn't have rope arrows in it just because of the engine they built it in. So instead you got like gloves that allowed you to climb walls at one point. But that was an okay game. Then they released another Thief that was very bad. The most recent iteration of Thief is a not good game that had a lot of problems with it. It was very poorly reviewed. I think that Zero Punctuation guy on YouTube reviewed it as just like being a terrible, terrible game. But I loved the original. And this is another thing like Deus Ex where I think it was the best when it was in like the build engine or whatever. And if they did a retro version of this, again, like boomer shooters or whatever you want to call them, retro shooters are hot commodity right now. And I think there's an open market for people like the way these things look. And it doesn't have to be a shooter. It can be an RPG, or it can be like a Thief style game.
Yeah, there was that Proteus game last year.
Yeah, Proteus. I think that, I don't know, like Dishonored is a great iteration of this. And I think that it shares some of the development people or like maybe the company with Thief. But another version of Thief that is well executed, I think would be very, very fun to play. And I would love it.
Yeah, the Dishonored developers, instead of maybe doing something like Redfall, probably should have returned to...
That would be great, I have to say.
Something like Thief. Yeah.
It would be very cool if they did that. But the world of Thief is very interesting as well, because you're in a place that's just called the City. And it's like very steampunk. Like the Metal Age was such a good game because it incorporated like crazy looking robots, and it really scared me when I was a kid. There's some very creepy elements, almost like horror elements to Thief 2. And also the original Thief as well. There were monsters in it. But I love these games, and I think it would make a great... It's ripe for a sequel. What is your number 1 game on this list?
My number 1, again, we did this on Blind Spotting at one point. Go check out our YouTube channel. It is Sleeping Dogs.
Oh, yeah.
It's another open world game, which is maybe like a symptom of, these games, the last 2 games we talked about were on the 360 generation, but it was an open world game set in sort of a fictionalized Hong Kong, and it was like you and me both like old Hong Kong movies.
We do.
And this very much feels like an old Hong Kong movie. But it had the combat style of the Batman Arkham games. And that's like a very good combat style. And so you're doing like these martial arts fights, but you have basically Batman Arkham style combat with it. And there was just something about that formula, like just the open world that was like a cool setting, and it felt like an old Hong Kong movie, and you had Batman Arkham combat. Like I just loved all of it. I thought it was so cool and so fun. And I don't remember who developed this game off the top of my head. And I don't know that this necessarily even needs to be a franchise, but if they wanted to make another game like this, the fact that this was like a one-off game, like a one-hit wonder, I don't know why it didn't get some sort of a sequel, but I would love it if it eventually did. What's your number 1?
I don't remember if we did a blind spotting on this or not. If we did, I would have had to have it on an emulator, because it's another N64 game. It's something I 100% have talked about, at least. But this is Space Station Silicon Valley, which is...
I don't remember doing one.
It's an N64 game that I loved as a kid. It was my favorite N64 game, I think. But it was level-based, and basically the story of it is at some point in the past, society made a space station that kind of went out of control, and it's now plummeting towards Earth, and it's going to crash into Earth. So the solution is they send this guy out with his robot, and they're going to get onto the space station and see what's wrong with it. You play as the robot, but you crash land into the space station, which is now inhabited completely by robot animals. And your body breaks, and so you're basically just your little chip. And the gameplay of this is when an animal has died, or like a robot animal has died, or it's like on its health all runs out, it like goes into like a fritzed out state where it's kind of just like sparking, and you can jump into it as your chip and inhabit that. And each animal has like cool, interesting abilities. So like, for instance, it's not just regular animals. Like there are sheep in the first world where one button allows you to like just say baa, but another one allows you to hover because they're like very soft and floaty. But there's also like a dog that is on wheels that shoots rockets, and you can just like be in that. It's a lot of interesting, cool little puzzles. In every zone, there's like a desert zone and a jungle zone and an ice zone. And the first zone is just like farmland, basically. But
yeah, I was gonna say I looked up some gameplay because I've never heard of this game, and I don't know if it's just like the graphic style being on the Nintendo 64, but it's reminding me of Banjo-Kazooie.
Very similar. That's definitely a contemporary. It was around that time, but it's very fun. And every world, every zone you went into, it's kind of Mario-esque in that every zone you went into had a number of objectives. And when you completed the objective, you got, I actually don't even remember the currency you're looking for. It's probably like bolts or something. But you would do it, and then you could go back in the world and do the second objective. It's like an old school Mario game where you go into you basically jump into the bomb painting, and then you do something and you get a star, and then you jump back into it and you do the next thing and you get another star. And you're collecting all this stuff, I think, to get your robot body back, because you ultimately need to get your body back to do a thing. But I 100%ed it as much as you can. It's actually impossible to 100% it because there's a glitch in the game where you can't get one collectible, unfortunately. But this was a great game that I think if you gave it like the Mario Odyssey treatment, where it's not like level based anymore, it's like world based, and you don't like when you get a star or whatever the collectible is, it doesn't reset the level and you have to go back from the beginning. If this was like a Mario Odyssey style thing, actually Mario Odyssey is a very good template for this, because similar to this, you're jumping into people with your hat, with Cappy. Like I think that's it's actually a very similar one-to-one, because I can't think of a better description of it. I'm just now realizing it. It's blowing my mind. But I would love a Space Station Silicon Valley modern day take on it that is similar to Mario Odyssey. I think that would be great. That's my number one.
This is a deep cut. I've never heard of this before.
It's a great game. You should definitely... I don't think it's on... If it ever does come to the expansion pass for Switch, that will get me to subscribe to the expansion pass, because I would love to play through this again.
Yeah, definitely be a blast from the past.
We're running a little long. Do you want to get briefly to what we've been watching and playing?
Yeah. So I, as I said before, have finished both Fire Emblem Engage and Dead Space Remake, and I briefly played the Sea of Stars demo. And like I said, Sea of Stars, that game is very, very much in the vein of like Chrono Trigger and Super Mario RPG, like the SNES era, like JRPG. And I think it's going to be great. That game is going to be very good.
I'm excited for it, yeah.
I'm definitely picking that up once it comes out. And I like the art style a lot. I like the turn-based combat. Like I said, it kind of has that Super Mario RPG thing where you can hit an action button to sort of enhance your attacks or your defense. And so it's I was very impressed with the demo. I'm definitely going to play that when it comes out. I liked Fire Emblem Engage and Dead Space Remake quite a bit. I honestly don't know where I will put them on the top 10. I know I am probably the only person in the world who would potentially put Fire Emblem Engage ahead of Dead Space Remake, because people love Dead Space Remake, and I think it is like obviously a better game if you're looking at it at like an objective sense. But I just loved. I think Fire Emblem Engage is more my style of game, because I'm not super into like survival horror. But I did enjoy Dead Space Remake. I thought it was very, very good. And I do wonder if they will follow through and do Dead Space Remake 2 and 3. And I would probably at least play the second one because I've heard that one's maybe the best of the three. So there is that. And then, I don't think I liked Engage as much as Three Houses, but I do think the combat was very good. And there were enough likable characters there to keep me going. It is like story and writing wise, it is a very silly game, but as long as it has enough likable characters and the combat is good, which it was, I feel comfortable putting it in a similar boat as like Mario and Rabbids Sparks of Hope, which also had a very silly story. But the combat was the thing that kept driving that game. Mm-hmm. And I played it enough to finish both of those games and liked them quite a bit. So, and then Wild Hearts, I'm excited to play more of that. I think I will try to play more of it. I know Atomic Heart is coming out next week as we're recording this. So I will maybe try to balance by playing a little bit of both before we record next. So what about you?
I have started playing the Metroid Prime Remastered.
Oh, you did? You did pick it up then?
I picked it up. I'm liking it a lot. I have had to, unfortunately, Google where to go a couple of times.
Yeah, I wondered about that.
Which you have to do. I had to do it with Metroid Dread even, because I just I get lost, and it's not as well signposted, I think, as Metroid Dread. But the graphics are great. It is very fun. I wish you could edit the controls a little bit. They are still, I mean, there's dual stick now, but I wish there was a button to change your, there's a lot of unused buttons, and you've got you're going to eventually have 4 different visors and 4 different kinds of hand cannons or whatever, blasters. And the way you have to change them, I think, could have been adapted for a modern day controller a little better. But overall, I'm loving it. I don't know where I am in the story. I just met my first Metroid, and I got the thermal visor, so everything is dark around me right now. So I don't know where I'm at with that. I've been watching more Farscape, which we should maybe do a longer thing on Farscape because we both like it so much. And I am realizing I maybe have not seen a lot of the first season, but
oh really?
It's a lot of stuff is happening that I don't remember.
Yeah, I need to. I've been meaning to start watching it again so that we can actually have a segment on the podcast where we can talk about some of the episodes or whatever. But
and the final thing, we talked earlier about how we're both into old Hong Kong movies. I watched an old Hong Kong movie called Yes, Madam. Have you watched this movie?
I have not heard of this movie, no.
It's called, all of these 80s and 90s Hong Kong movies are infuriatingly titled because they have 5 different names for their different releases because they didn't release in America for a while, and then they got an American release, and they just both have to exist simultaneously. And it happened a lot when I was watching old Jackie Chan movies. Yeah. But this one is called Yes, Madam sometimes, and it's also called In the Line of Duty 2. And it stars Michelle Yeoh and a girl, some British girl who I've never heard of. But it's great. It's basically a cop movie where Michelle Yeoh and this British girl team up, and it's all centering around this microfilm because a criminal has incriminating evidence that is on this microfilm that they have to get. A lot of interesting characters. One guy, the dubbing they did for this is insane. And I think one of the people may be voiced by the guy who does the voice for Gonzo on the Muppets. It sounds exactly like Gonzo. I don't know if it actually is. It's also impossible to figure out who the dubbing voices were. I tried for 30 minutes last night, and it's not possible, I think. Maybe it is, and I haven't found the right place for it, but it's been wiped from time. But a great movie. The ending was not great. I will say that. I don't want to spoil the ending, but it's incredibly immediate to the point where I think they maybe ran out of money. But a great little movie. I was going to watch In the Line of Duty 3 and 4, but then I realized that Michelle Yeoh isn't in those. It's another girl. I also don't know what In the Line of Duty 1 is. I don't think it has Michelle Yeoh either. So it's kind of like those super cop movies with Jackie Chan where every one of them is called something different, and it's very hard to determine the chronology unless you see what year they came out. But Yes, Madam is available on Amazon Prime if you want to stream it.
I feel like this was a common thing in Hong Kong film because like speaking of movies that we somewhat watched recently, in the last like several weeks, it's been a little bit of time, but I rewatched the first Infernal Affairs movie, and because I for Christmas my brother got me the Criterion Collection released the trilogy of those movies on Blu-ray, so he got that for me for Christmas, and I rewatched the first one several weeks ago now, and I was like, I actually don't remember what goes on in the second and third movie, but like, not to spoil the movies, but like most of the people are dead.
Yeah.
And yet the next like two movies in the trilogy still has at least one of the like principal cast of that first movie. So I do need to go back and like rewatch the second and third movies and figure out what was going on with them.
The first one. I've never seen the second or third one ever.
Yeah, no, famously, the first one was remade in America by, oh gosh, what's his name?
Scorsese?
Yeah, Scorsese, as The Departed, which, of course, won a bunch of Academy Awards. But basically, it's a triad movie with, a cop who has gone undercover as a gangster for like this big mobster man. And he has also implanted one of his underlings as a cop, and so they're sort of investigating each other, and it's like really nail biting to see like who's going to uncover who first, and it's a very good movie. But yeah, it's crazy to me that Andy Lau is like maybe, or at least that character, if not played by a different person, is like in all three of the movies, I think. But I also haven't seen it in a long time, so maybe it makes more sense than I am thinking. So should we put Metroid Prime Remastered on our top 10 then?
I want to beat it first. I don't know. Again, like I said, I don't know how far along I am. I do like it a lot. Yeah, let's do it actually.
Let's just pop it in here. We'll see.
Because you're getting the physical copy at some point, right?
Yeah, so that's actually an interesting saga. So Nintendo, when they made this announcement, they're like, digital version is out now. Physical copy is going to release on February 22nd. And then the Wario 64 guy was tweeting, oh, get your pre-orders for the physical copy on Amazon and GameStop. And I was like, all right, I'm going to do it. And so and for whatever reason, Amazon had it listed as February 13th. And everybody's like, is it really going to release like February 13th, well ahead of Nintendo's actual like release date for this? And they said that they plan to like honor that release date. And then like when I went back to search for like that order, there was no information on like when it was going to ship. And I was like, maybe they went back on that. And then come to find out like a little bit later, there was an update to that said that it was releasing or now shipping on March 27th.
Whoa.
So like over a month later than it was actually supposed to release. And so I guess Amazon and GameStop, as they do, just tend to oversell their pre-orders, and then they have to ship them in waves. And so, yeah, I got my pre-order in, but I'm evidently not within the first wave of them shipping physical copies out. So I'm going to have to wait over a month.
Oh, wow.
To actually get my hands on a copy of it. And supposedly I've seen on Reddit that some people were able to like find it locally in stores, like even ahead of, February 22nd. And so some people already have it physically because they were able to get it from like a local Walmart or something like that, who probably didn't know when it was actually supposed to release and they just sold it to somebody.
Well, when you get it, I think you're going to like it.
Yeah, I'm interested in it for sure. For now, we have penciled it in at number 5 on our top 10 builder. And again, some of this is going to need rearranging. I haven't done enough thinking about where I would want Fire Emblem versus Dead Space, and I haven't played enough Wild Hearts to say for sure where that belongs. I just know I'm not super high on Hi-Fi Rush.
Yeah,
is basically all I know at this point. So we'll figure that out as we go. any parting wisdom for us this week?
You know, make sure your pre-orders are all in order. That's what I'll say.
Yeah, maybe don't pre-order games from Amazon or GameStop.
One, yeah. If you're going to pre-order, make sure you're getting it from a reliable source.
Get it from maybe like Best Buy or Target, which I have not had bad experiences with.
I've had great luck with Best Buy, actually.
But Amazon can be pretty hit or miss, and I don't know what's going on with GameStop. But that's our advice for this week. And on that note, go ahead and follow us at Starside Cafe on Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.